All right. So I'm figuring you folks can hear me, and I'm figuring the folks on Teams can hear me because I've got a clip on one of these. So I'm just going to talk. Good morning. Yes, hello, welcome everyone. And I have a question. How many of you are normally up at this time of day? How many of this? Okay. To everyone who's not normally up at this kind of day, I salute you because I am not a morning person. This is not a thing I normally do. But I run a .NET group down in London, and one of the things that we've been talking about is how can we get to a different group of people other than the ones who can turn up on a Wednesday evening at 7 o'clock and stuff. And so it's really interesting for me to come along and see how this format works. This is me, Dylan Beattie. I'm a Microsoft MVP. I run a .NET user group in London. I've been building web applications since I've been building web things since 1992. We didn't call them web apps then because no one had thought of that yet. But yeah, I've been doing HTML, CSS for literally since the web was invented. I give awesome presentations about technology. You give me a topic and I will geek out. I will find the fun bits. I get hired by people like Schneider Electric to write a keynote about electricity. And there's always a point where you're like, you're the experts on this. And I'm just a guy who reads a lot of Wikipedia. And they're like, yeah, but we want you to do your thing. So I do that for all kinds of companies. I teach people to build software. I do .NET, I do distributed systems, I do architecture. I did teach web components for a while, but no one pays for front-end training because everything has to be free on the web. I teach people to give presentations. I invent programming languages for fun. I invented a programming language called Rockstar. I have some Rockstar stickers if any of you want to get your Rockstar 2.0 self-adhesive certification. I make videos on YouTube, and yes, you can hire me. I am in the rare position at the moment that I have some spare time over the first half of this year. So if any of you has any little projects or tech days or any of that kind of thing, and you're thinking, we should get him to do that, yes, absolutely, come and say hello. Now, a couple of months ago, about a year ago now, I went online and I looked for a guidebook. I wanted to find a tourism guidebook to London, because London's where I live. London is home. But it's always interesting to see the way the rest of the world thinks your city works if you're just visiting for a couple of days. So I went on Amazon, I scrolled around a little bit, and I found, all kinds of different books. And then I found this one, The Essential London Travel Guide 2023 by Nash A Day. And at the time I looked, it had 62 ratings, had 4.0 stars. Now, I forgot to bring the book with me today because I left it on my desk at home, but I would like to read you a little excerpt. I ordered this book, I bought it, it turned up. Here is an excerpt from Nash A Day's Essential Travel Guide to London. Discover Westminster's hidden treasures. Embark upon a journey to discover the picturesque promenades, tranquil bodies of water, and avian inhabitants of the verdant and extensive estate of Hyde Park. Observe the ceremonial rotation of sentries at Buckingham Palace, the esteemed abode and governmental centre of the reigning monarch. This event shall commence at precisely 10:45 a.m., ensuring timely arrival to secure optimal viewing opportunities. The estimated duration for the task at hand is approximately 2,700 seconds. It is advisable to peruse the website prior to attendance, as the frequency of guard changes typically amounts to a bi-weekly occurrence. Now, if any of you has ever visited London in a tourist capacity, some of that might sound familiar. What they are describing here is a ceremony called the Changing of the Guard. It takes place at Buckingham Palace a couple of times a week. It is about 10:45. They got that bit right. Nobody in the history of the British monarchy has ever referred to this as the ceremonial rotation of sentries. That is not how human beings describe this. Now, Nash A Day is a publishing phenomenon. This person came out of nowhere about 2 years ago and absolutely dominated Amazon. They have a guidebook about London, Paris, Rome. They have a guide to winning mahjong. They have weight loss books. They have a boy's journey through life. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Nash, if you're real, click all the pictures of the bus. I do not think Nash A Day is a real person, and I do not think that the Essential London Travel Guide was written by humans. I think that it was generated by somebody sitting down with some kind of language model and just saying, write me a 250-page book about London, and then sticking that up on a drop shipping service and publishing it on Amazon. Now, to me, when I saw this was kind of like a bit of a, wow, holy crap, this is getting out of hand moment. And that's what I want to talk about today. Now, I'm just going to put a bit of a disclaimer up front on this. There are all sorts of words and terminology that are coming up in the field. The term artificial intelligence and AI at this point has basically been devalued to the point of uselessness. This has only happened four or five times before, and we're just going to keep trucking with it. I know people who actually work on these things. I know people who build language models, people who train them. I am not that expert. If you have questions about how this stuff actually really works, I'm the wrong person to talk to. But what I've been doing for a lot of years is looking at the way innovations in technology kind of, how do they affect people's relationship with tech and vice versa? Tech informs people's expectations about what a computer can do, what an app can do, what a website can do. And conversely, our industry is always churning out innovation that it's going to people and going, hey, look at this amazing thing we built. And sometimes people are like, that's really useful. And other times people are like, what's it for? Why do I need this? Now, the last couple of years has felt to me, in terms of, artificial intelligence, language models, and all the kinds of things that we're talking about here, it's felt a little bit like this. Like we're on a roller coaster and we're going up and we're going up and we're going up. And we know inevitably at some point on this thing, we are going to go over the top of the roller coaster. And maybe we're about here, or maybe we've already gone over the top and we're on the way down the other side. I'm not quite sure, but it's certainly somewhere around this point. Now, if you ride roller coasters for real, in real life, the first time you do this experience here, what happens is about here, your brain shuts down because there is no way you are going to survive this. And just complete, no, that's it. And then you come on the other side, you're like, wow, I'm still alive. This is unexpected. And you're like, I want another go. And you go around and you do it again, do it again. And you ride roller coasters enough times, you kind of get the hang of watching for the tipping point and seeing where that's going to happen. And AI is not my first roller coaster as a professional technologist. Does anyone know what this is? Well, it's a chromatograph CP341. This is a scanner. This is a scanner from around the mid-1980s. This picture is from the Museum of Printing in Massachusetts. This was the machine that you bought if you needed to get a photograph into a computer in about 1985. It cost about 150,000 US dollars. I've seen one of these working once. I did a visit to a newspaper office when I was a kid, about 11 years old, and they had one of these, and we got to see them scan a photograph. It took about 15 minutes because you have to tape the photograph very carefully onto a spinning drum, and then you close the lid and you switch the thing on and you wait. Now, these days, we're like, why is that even a problem that people have? Because the vast majority of the photographs that exist are already in the computer because that's where we took them. And the computer's a phone, or the computer is a digital camera. This whole idea of getting photography into a computer in the 1980s, even if you got it in, how are you going to get it back out again? We didn't have high-definition laser printers, and we didn't have high-definition color displays. So unless you had the kind of typesetting equipment they have at newspapers, there was no point getting the photograph in because you couldn't get it back out again. Now, this is the number of cameras sold over the last sort of 70 years or so. And what happened, film cameras kind of peaked around about 2000. 2000 is when digital cameras got good. And then there was this massive spike in digital cameras. And then what happened is we got to a point where no one bought cameras anymore because everyone had one in their phone all the time anyway. And so the only people actually buying cameras are specialists, enthusiasts, hobby photographers. This is data. Data normally has stories buried in it. And what I'm interested in is the story. What happened there? What was it that caused that tipping point? And that was the Olympic Games. Anyone know where the Olympics was held in the year 2000? Sydney, Australia. Now, the Olympic Games 4 years previously was in Atlanta, Georgia in the United States. And the photographers who were sent to Atlanta to cover the Olympic Games, they shot on film, all of them. If you turned up to the Olympics in '96 in the press circle there with a digital camera, they would have laughed at you for bringing a toy to a knife fight. You don't do that. So you take pictures all day, then you go back to your hotel room, you go to the Kodak press office, they develop all your photographs right there, turn them around as quick as you can, back to your hotel room, you get your hand lens, you go through the negatives, you find the good ones, you put them in a Federal Express envelope, and you send them off to, your newspaper, who will get them in time to put them on the back page or the front page if your country won a gold medal. 2000 was different for a lot of reasons. Sydney, Australia it's a long way away. Like, it's a long way away from the rest of Australia. I've done the flight from Sydney to Perth. That's like longer than any flight you can take in Europe, and you haven't even left the country yet. There is a time zone difference, but Also, there aren't a lot of success stories about Australian internet, but this was the point where if you were staying in one of the Olympic hotels, you could probably get ISDN. You could get a good enough internet connection that you could actually send digital files back to your newspaper office. But the other piece of the puzzle was this thing. This was the Nikon D1. It was the first digital camera that was created by a professional photographic company for professional photographers. They talked to a whole bunch of people, like, what do you need? Well, if you're going to go and shoot on assignment, you're going to do reportage, you're going to do sports, what do you need? And they built this thing. Now, by any contemporary standard, this thing sucked as a camera. It had about 1.4 megapixels. It had a burst rate. It could shoot 3 pictures in a second, but then it needed to stop and have a little rest, which is not ideal if you're shooting, high-speed athletics and sports and stuff. But what photographers realized very quickly, quite a lot of them took this along, they'd shoot a couple of frames on the Nikon, and then they'd use their old film camera for the rest of the day. And they realized after a couple of days that all the pictures that made it in the newspapers were the digital ones. Because the newspapers are like, we don't care. We'd rather have like 1.2 megapixels of digital now than wait for overnight negatives to be FedExed from Sydney, Australia, because that's going to mean we miss the press and we have to run with tomorrow's edition. The news agencies were, this was the point where basically digital photography took off in a big way. People realized it was good enough. That triggers the investment. Everyone's like, we got to get one of those Nikon cameras. They buy one. Nikon are like, this is successful. Let's build a better one. 2 megapixels, 5 megapixels, 8 megapixels. The Nikon D1 was not the first digital camera. This was the first digital camera. This was built by Kodak in 1973. It's got a tape. It has an actual cassette on the camera so you can record your photographs, because floppy disks didn't really exist at the time that Kodak developed this. But this is the reason why the Olympic Games to me is interesting is because 4 years in tech is kind of long enough that you can see the differences, but it's also short enough you can still trace the continuity. 96, you shoot on film, everyone does. No one's shooting on digital in Atlanta. 2000 is the year everyone kind of goes, yeah, maybe there's something to it. 2004, when the Olympic Games was in Athens, everyone was shooting digital. No one was shooting on film for that because it just didn't make sense anymore. And that's just a 4-year gap. Now, camera technology has advanced in leaps and bounds since then. This is a Canon EOS M200. This is amazing. This will shoot 24 megapixels, 60 frames per second, high definition. This is so cheap, I have 2 of them that I use as webcams. That's the sort of level of innovation that we've got to. Now, if you had gone to the Kodak press desk at the Sydney Olympics in 2000 and said to them, Kodak is going to stop making film within a decade, they'd have laughed at you. Kodak had $1 billion in cash. Kodak had their own skyscraper in Rochester, New York. Kodak was an industrial global powerhouse. I did a kind of back of an envelope calculation. I think Kodak made about 10p for every photograph taken on this planet until the year 2000. Because it's not just that they sold the film. Kodak sold the pipeline. Kodak sold the machines. Kodak sold the chemicals that every high street, Photoshop, and pharmacy used to develop your holiday snaps. They sold all of this. They had this almost monopoly over that side of the industry. Kodak still survives today as a brand, but if you go and look them up on Wikipedia, you'll see that it produces various products related to its historic basis in analog photography. Now, it isn't that Kodak missed the boat on digital photography. It's that digital photography destroyed the industry that they made all their money from by coming up with a better way of solving the same problem. The other revolution that I kind of had a front row seat to, because I was one of the college kids who was swapping MP3s when that came around, was MP3 digital audio. Now, MP3s are older than anyone thinks. The MP3 protocol, the MP3 file format, that dates back to 1991. But the problem in 1991, we didn't have any computers fast enough to play them. If you wanted to listen to an MP3 song in 1991, first you'd have to decompress it. That would take about 4 times the length of the song. So you want to listen to, I don't know, Taylor Swift, first you've got to decompress it. That's 15 minutes. Then you've got to listen to it. And then you've got to delete the file because you don't have enough disk space to store more than one of these, and delete that and then find another one and decompress that one. The tipping point for this was the Pentium 60, or rather the enabling point for this was the Pentium 60. Pentium 60 was the first processor that was fast enough to play an MP3 file. Pentium 75, that could play an MP3 at the same time as you were using Microsoft Word. And that was a big deal because if you were a college student, that meant you could write essays and listen to pirated music at the same time. which was fantastic if you were one of those people who listened to music in a room that had a desktop computer in it. Because laptops aren't a thing, and nobody has MP3 players and stuff in the car. We haven't invented those yet. So for a certain kind of nerd, this was a massive deal. For the rest of the world, no, MP3 is just not a thing anybody is interested in until this thing comes along. And this was the tipping point for the music industry, because this was the thing that made normal people go, I want that. I want the Apple Music player. I want the original iPod. I want to be able to listen to digital audio with that thing. And this didn't really do anything that wasn't already possible. There were pocket MP3 players already by this point. What had happened is that Steve Jobs and Apple had sat down with the record companies and they had said, look, let me spell this out here. This is what's going on here. You make a lot of money. You think you're selling music. You're not. You're selling plastic. You are selling vinyl. You are selling compact discs and cassettes. You have trucks and stores and shipping containers full of plastic because that is the only way that you can sell music, because that's the only way you know how to deliver it. What if you could just sell music? What if you could sell a song for $1, no plastic, no retail, no stores involved, we'll take 30 cents and you get to keep the rest. That was the tipping point. That was the thing that revolutionized audio. And just as, the photography companies, the cost of a reel of film would have been about, probably £5, £5 or £6 to buy one of these. And you got 36 pictures on it. So you had to approach photography in a certain way. You would think about the pictures you were taking. You would frame them. You wouldn't see them for maybe same day if you wanted to pay for it. More likely 2 weeks. Get back from holiday or, after the wedding, you send all the pictures off. You eventually get them back. You look at them, you're like, that was not very good. That one's not very good. That one's not very good. What digital photography did is it reduced the cost of that process to zero. Now, this is the kind of an interesting lens to look at what's happening with AI and machine learning and language models and stuff at the moment. What is the cost that is being reduced here? MP3s and streaming, they reduced the cost of music distribution to effectively zero. They didn't reduce the cost of creating it. You still need musicians in a studio, but once you've got the recording, you can give it to anyone basically for free. Digital photography, if you can point a device at something and click the shutter, the cost of capturing and sharing that image becomes basically zero. Now, I was at a thing last year in the Netherlands, and I got to see this guy. This is David Foster, who runs a consultancy called Applied Data Science. And one of the slides in his talk I thought was really interesting was this: generative AI reduces the cost of human-like thought to near zero. Now, I want to do an experiment. I'd like all of you just to close your eyes for a second, and I want you to think about a purple penguin. All right, you got it? Okay, open your eyes. What did that cost? I mean, if any of you ever had a very traumatic encounter with a penguin, maybe there was an emotional cost. That didn't cost anything, right? Like, human thought fundamentally is free. Now, imagine you're sat on a train, you're looking out the window, you see somebody on the platform, they kind of, they clutch their chest and then they fall over, and you think, oh, wow, that person must have had a heart attack. Is that thought worth anything? If you get your phone out and you call the emergency services, or you pull the emergency, or you do something about it, then the thought has value, but in and of itself, the thought is worthless. And if you took that thought and automated it, and just built a sensor network of cameras that just every time someone has a fatal heart attack, they're just going to make a note of it in a database somewhere. You've just built psychopathy as a service. Well done. Good game. When there are these, natural disasters, there's, the terrible fires going on in California at the moment. There are earthquakes, there are mudslides. People go on social media sending thoughts and prayers. You think the people on the ground want thoughts and prayers? No, send food, send help. Send assistance, send actual tangible material things that we can use. The cost of thought is really not anything, reducing that to zero, I don't think gets us anywhere. Now, what's happened in the last couple of years is digital technology has got to a point where it's become uncannily good at creating certain kinds of things. It can create text, it can create audio, speech, music, video, images, all these kinds of things. Anything we can put on a screen can now be duplicated. We have machines out there that can crank out fairly convincing representations of things. But we've also, in the same time frame, lived through a, sort of very, very profound change in the way society interacts, because we've had COVID, we've had pandemic, we've had lockdowns. We had a couple of years when we couldn't do this. We couldn't get together and talk to each other face to face. We had to do this. And a lot of us realized that, yeah, something on a screen, all right, up to a point, it's pretty good. There are certain kinds of media, cinema, music, that we are very comfortable consuming digitally. But when it comes to connections, networking, interaction, learning, conversation, we will still make the effort to go to events where people get to meet face to face in real life in 3D. And that, I think, is what I found so kind of compelling about my London travel guide, is that it felt like it was the first time for me that AI had broken free of the screen and gone, no, I'm a book. I'm real. I'm this real thing. Now, books to me, people in my generation, we've kind of grown up with this idea that you can trust books and you can't trust the internet. If you can go and get it from a bookstore or a library, then it's probably been edited. It's been fact-checked. It's been researched. The people who wrote it have a real investment in not making stuff up, unless it's fiction. But, if it's a reference book, they're like, if we have a mistake, and it's a bad mistake, we could get into all kinds of trouble. So there is this massive kind of incentive on them to not make those kinds of mistakes. You will verify your sources, you'll cite your references, you will pay professional human beings to make sure that you do not print things which are not verifiable, because if you do, you could end up in court, you could end up in all kinds of trouble. The London Travel Guide, I don't know how many human beings were involved in the production of this. I know there was one, because I saw the guy who brought it to my front door. He was definitely human. Or the robots got real good and no one told anybody, but I'm pretty sure the delivery driver was human. I know for a fact that if there was a human being at Amazon whose job is do not publish crap fake books, that person was not involved, because the book is fake and the book is crap. I mean, it's a real book, but this was probably generated, the text in it was generated by machines. That text will have been uploaded by machines. It will have been typeset by machines, and you can tell. It will have been uploaded by machines. When you buy it, my bank's computers talk to Amazon's bank's computers. The money changes hands. There's a robotic warehouse somewhere where this thing probably gets printed on demand by machines and dropped in a hopper and packaged and dispatched and everything. And the reason for this is that Amazon wants to be they're already $1 trillion company. They probably want to be a $10 trillion company. And the way you get that kind of scale is by eliminating the things that don't scale. And the thing in their whole business empire and the vast majority of these $1 trillion tech scale-ups that doesn't scale is human beings. Because humans are messy, humans are unpredictable, humans are angry bags of meat who want holidays and toilet breaks and food and human rights and all these things that just don't fit into a $10 trillion business plan. And so Amazon has got to where they are by looking at every single part of their delivery pipeline which requires a human and being, how do we automate that? How do we automate that? How do we automate that? All the way down to looking at, could we use drones to deliver the book? And then we wouldn't need any human beings involved in that at all. Now, we're getting into some sort of dystopian territory. And obviously, Hollywood has done the whole killer robots and nanomachines and gray goo and AI and Ultron taking over the world and wiping out the human race and everything. It's done that to death. But there's an angle in here that I don't think anybody had on their bingo card for how the robot apocalypse was going to get us. My London travel guide, if you look at the section on restaurants, it suggests that we could go to a sushi restaurant, which is on the 39th and 38th floors of the iconic Heron Tower in Covent Garden. Heron Tower, that's Covent Garden. That's about 4 kilometers, about 3 miles between those two. Big deal. The AI made a mistake. Now, AI is churning out all kinds of books at the moment. AI is churning out the Amsterdam Travel Guide and the Mahjong How to Play Edition, the Ultimate Guide to Resistance Band Training, and the Wild Mushroom Cookbook, and the Wild Mushroom Cookbook, and the Wide Mushroom Cookbook, if you don't even care enough to get your front cover right. Now, who wants to go out into the forest and pick some mushrooms we found and use an AI-generated guidebook that tells us they're safe to eat? And then we're going to go home and fry them up. The first couple of times I did this talk, this was speculation. This was hypothetical. Then last year, somebody sent me a link. Hey, have you seen this thing on Reddit? I'm like, what thing on Reddit? Somebody's family ended up in hospital after they ate mushrooms that they were told was safe to pick because they had a mushroom picking book that they'd received as a gift that they did not know had been generated using AI. And the Reddit thread was them saying, what kind of crime has been committed here? And everyone's going, we don't know. Clearly, I think we can hopefully all agree that if you pay good money for a book that says it tells you which mushrooms are safe to eat, and your family ends up in hospital, something bad has happened. Somebody has been negligent, or somebody has overlooked something, or some sort of criminal deception has taken place. But the legal framework in this country has no idea who did the crime or what crime it was or how imagine dialing 999 and going, hello, yeah, I need to report a fake AI generated mushroom book that poisoned my children. Now, I'm from a generation where, like I said, books were the source of truth. When I first started learning to program, internet existed, but the web didn't. Stack Overflow didn't. ChatGPT certainly didn't. I had to read books. And the books, they were generally relied upon to be correct. And one of the things that has definitely happened within my career, people don't rely on textbooks for programming anymore because we can find most of that stuff online. And this has kind of led to an industry where things now evolve so fast that we don't have to have a year-long code freeze so they can write the textbooks. We're just like, yeah, just crank out the next version. People figure out how it works. And so I'm really interested in what things like ChatGPT and Copilot can do to kind of fill the gap between the knowledge you have in your head and the knowledge you need to be able to do your job. And one of the things that ChatGPT particularly has got very, very good at is analyzing chunks of code and telling you what they do. Anyone recognize this? Well, it looks complicated. I mean, it looks like we've got longs and floats, and we got three halves, we got bit shifts and pointers, and let's ask ChatGPT what this is going to do. So I'm going to go in over here, and I'm going to say, what does this code do? And it pops up. This code implements a fast inverse square root function, which is often used in computer graphics. This is the Quake 3 fast inverse square root. And this does an astonishingly good job of walking you step by step what this function does, why it works the way it does. Now let's mess with it a little bit. Let's grab the code there. We're going to drop that in here. And then I'm just going to come down here, and let's make that negative just to see what happens. And then we've got a bit shift down here. So we're just going to change the direction. So that's going to shift the bits in the other direction. Going to see what ChatGPT makes of this. Now, this is something that has got significantly better in the 2 years since I started running these kinds of things, because now it says this code is an attempt to modify the well-known inverse square root. However, it has several issues. We're like, yes, okay, good job. Yes, it does. And when you look at stuff like this, and you look at this relationship between machine learning models and code as an artifact, code as something that needs to be read, maintained, written, generated, the headlines very quickly get to, will AI replace software engineers? Now, the answer is no. And I'm going to prove that 4 different ways. One, there is a thing called Betteridge's law of headlines, which says if a media headline asks a question, the answer is always no. Just is, because that's how you sell newspapers. The second reason it's no, I want you to think about all the people in the course of your career who have ever paid you money to write code. I want you to think about the clients, the customers, your first boss. I want you to imagine that person sitting down with something like ChatGPT, getting some code out of it, and launching a service or a business based on the output of that. Can you picture them doing it? I've worked with some very, very capable bosses and business people. I cannot imagine any of them using AI instead of using folks like us to do what they do. Because, reason number 3, software engineers don't just write code. Who's a dev in here? Who writes code for money or has done at some point in their life? Hands up if you write code 100% of your working week. 75? 50? 25? Yeah. Professional developers spend most of their time talking to people, reading stuff, studying stuff, trying to figure out where the hell this thing got deployed, looking for problems in DNS because it's always DNS, talking to this client, talking to that client, trying to get that supplier to talk to that supplier because you can't do anything about it unless they communicate with each other. AI is not going to replace those parts of being a professional developer anytime soon. But 4, it's not going to replace software engineers because it doesn't actually work. A couple of weeks ago, I was trying to get a Jekyll website that I have on GitHub pages to serve particular kinds of static content, and I needed a certain content type header on it. And I'd kind of, hit a brick wall with the documentation, so I decided I was going to ask ChatGPT about it, so I did. And it said, oh, you do this. You use a plugin for custom serving. You add Jekyll serve static to your gem file. And I went, all right, let's try that. And nothing happened. And so I asked it, please provide the URL where I can learn about the Jekyll serve static gem. And it seems there was a misunderstanding. There isn't a specific gem named Jekyll serve static. The closest functionality. Now, this is bullshit as a service. And what it's done is it's come up with an answer that has the right form and structure and shape, even down to respect. Like if this gem existed, it would be called that, and that is how you install it. And so the information is all plausible. It just has a slight problem that it's completely wrong. The thing it's talking about does not exist, has never existed, and that is not the answer to the problem. Let's get ChatGPT to draw a ginger cat riding on a shark at sunset, waving a Norwegian flag and playing the ukulele. Ah, isn't that amazing? Like all the human artists can retire now. AI and machine learning models have become phenomenally good at doing this kind of impressive, stupid stuff. Like this is not a thing anybody needs, but it's kind of fun and it's kind of funny. And it does make a lot of artists go, oh, crap. And I'm like, has anyone ever paid you to do that? And they're like, well, no, but I'm like, yeah, exactly. Now, let's ask it a slightly harder question. We're just gonna move on here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna ask it to draw 3 blue circles. Okay. 4 blue circles? Let's see if it can draw 4 blue circles. Do we think that the $1 billion of investment that they've put into DALL-E here is going to be able to draw 5 blue circles? No. I can't count to 5. It can't count at all. It can't count things. The models that we are using here, they have no concept of counting numbers. They have no concept of quantity. They just have the images or the text. We kind of mash them around until they pass the filters, which is why these kinds of images have become like notorious indicators of AI because they have the wrong number of fingers, to the point where you can go online right now and you can buy a rubber finger. And the idea with this is you put it on your finger and then you go out and you do crimes. And then when they get you on the security cameras, you're like, this is AI generated footage. You see, look, it's got the wrong number of fingers on it. And if we go back to our ginger cat riding on the shark with the Norwegian flag and everything, and we take a close look, how many tuning pegs are on the top of the ukulele there? And how many strings have made it as far as the cat's right paw? It can't get these kinds of details right. And if you look at, the great pioneering human artists like Leonardo da Vinci, one of the things that he did was he did anatomy. He took animals apart and dissected human cadavers to figure out how they work so he could draw more accurate illustrations of these kinds of things. There was one example I saw earlier this year. Was this, is OpenAI's O1 a good calculator? We tested it on up to 20, there's 20-digit numbers by 20-digit numbers. At what point do language models become incapable of getting basic arithmetic right? Now, you can't believe everything you read on the internet, but Yuntian Deng has some pretty solid academic credentials in this field, and this is the improvement they're talking about. This was GPT-4o. Basically, when you get to 5 by 5-digit numbers, you're getting 3% accuracy. Like you ask it to multiply 2 numbers and they're like, this is the AI industry going, look how much better it got. And somebody just posted this reply to it. This is the accuracy of a calculator. We've solved this problem. We solved this problem in the 1960s using transistors. It wasn't difficult at all. For me, the kind of absolute best demonstration of the problem with using machine learning models in any kind of digital product development is what happens when you ask them to think about crossword puzzles, or you ask them to work with crossword puzzles, which, as we all know, you do using wooden tiles, because apparently that's a thing that the machines believe now. Any of you folks into cryptic crosswords? Because they have these clues in them. Like a blue flower confused Neil. And at a face value reading of this, you're like, oh, see, there's another picture a human artist was never asked to draw. This is Neil, and Neil is confused by a blue flower. And you're like, oh, well, what's the answer to that? And you're looking at, maybe it's an iris, but that doesn't explain anything. To solve crossword puzzles, you need to break language apart in your brain and see how many different ways you can put it back together. Because the word confused here, that maybe signifies mixing things up. Maybe signifies that we're going to take the letters Neil and we're going to shuffle those around. And you're like, all right, well, what have we got out of this? Well, we can get Nile, and we know that there's a blue Nile. And that's when it's not a flower, it's a flower. It's a thing that flows. It's a river. It's the Blue Nile River is the answer to this. This is how cryptic crosswords work. And we've got the anagram indicator and stuff in there. So what we're going to do is we're going to go into ChatGPT and we're going to ask it to make us a crossword puzzle. So Techfast Knots is an early morning tech meetup in Nottingham, UK. Write a cryptic crossword clue for Techfast Knots, which uses an anagram. This is sped up, by the way, quite a lot. Here's a cryptic crossword clue. Where's the anagram? Oh, you're absolutely right. My earlier attempt didn't contain the anagram. Here's a corrected version of the clue with a proper anagram. No, it's not a proper anagram. The letters you've given us, they contain the letter I. Oh, you're absolutely right. Again, thank you for pointing that out. Let's try a proper anagram for that. This one works cleanly. No extra letters sneaking in. Where's the N? Oh, you're absolutely right. Thank you for your patience. Here's a carefully checked version. You can go round and round and round. And the thing about this is it never gives up. There is nothing in this model which has been trained to say, I'm sorry, I can't do that. Because none of the training data, this stuff has been trained on books and it's been trained on web pages and blog posts and all that kind of stuff. And we as a species did not publish a whole lot of books in which someone says, I can't do this and I can't do that. And here's a whole bunch of other stuff I can't do and I'm really sorry. That's not in its training data. It just doesn't exist. It has been trained to synthesize what looks like, yeah, here's the thing you asked for. And to back off and to apologize and to say, oh, I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Here's a correct one. That's still wrong. I'm sorry, I got it wrong. Here's a correct one. Imagine interacting with this kind of person or this kind of personality in any, you're trying to, I don't know, check in for a flight. And you're like, hello, the name on my boarding pass is wrong. And you give it to them. They're like, oh, let me fix that for you. And they give you a boarding pass. You're like, now this is the wrong flight. They're like, oh, so it is. Thank you. Let's get it right this time. They give you back another one. Round and round and round. This is what we're talking about when we talk about companies going AI customer service models, is we're taking this kind of, this kind of approach, this kind of algorithmic, just bullheaded optimism. And then, yeah, we'll replace human beings with that. Now, there's a word that comes up an awful lot when you start talking about these kinds of problems, which is hallucination. And anybody who knows anything about, psychology, psychiatry, mental health, these kinds of things, hallucination is the experience of seeing, hearing, feeling, or smelling something that does not exist. Language models cannot see, they cannot hear, they cannot feel, they cannot smell. As far as they are concerned, nothing exists. So technically, everything they ever do is hallucinating. A language model is like, come in here, read this library. Right, now take this really, really strong acid and go and lie in that isolation tank and tell us what you come up with. And most of the time, we just kind of go with it because the stuff it hallucinates looks plausible. And, sometimes it actually is a correct answer to our question. The reason they call it hallucination is because if they called it making up wrong answers, you wouldn't be able to get investment for your AI startup. And so the language kind of shifts. We reframe things. That's hallucinating. It's all hallucinations all the way down. Now, the kind of fundamental question at the bottom of this entire stack is, are machines going to develop general intelligence? Are we going to get a synthetic digital system or some kind of synthetic system that human beings built, which exhibits the same degree of intelligence as human beings? And the best book I found on this is actually way earlier, and this came out in 1989. It's by a guy called Roger Penrose. He's a British mathematician. If any of you have ever seen Penrose tiles, the little weird kite shapes that will tile a plane to infinity without ever repeating, it's that Penrose. And this book was his collaboration with, he got together like a bunch of, computer scientists, but also people like anesthetists, people who work with consciousness for a living. And they're like, we need to knock people out for surgery and then bring them back around. And, all these people working in these fields kind of got them together and said, well, are we going to get there? And basically this book comes up with, there are three possible outcomes to this. One is, yes, we will get artificial general intelligence using digital computers. We just need to wait. When the computers are fast enough, it'll happen. The second one was, yes, but it'll need quantum computers. One of Penrose's hypotheses was that consciousness is a quantum phenomenon that you cannot replicate using solid state transistors and microcircuits. And this one was interesting because a lot of people went, you can't have quantum processes in the human brain because it's too hot and too messy and too wet. And, oh, my battery is running low. I better plug in my PC. It shouldn't be doing that. It's, that's on, that's on, that's on, that's on, that's on, that's on, that's on. There we go. It's fine. Or three, can't be done. We're not going to get synthetic consciousness anytime soon. Now, I don't know which one of these is right. One thing that I kind of do absolutely believe is that if it is possible and it can be done using digital computers and it's a question of just waiting, it's not a question of just waiting for the next generation of language models or the one after that or the one after that. I saw a lovely analogy for this. The idea that we are going to get general intelligence by building bigger and better language models is like the idea that if you train racehorses fast enough, one of them will turn into a motorcycle. It's not. You train racehorses, you breed racehorses, you get faster and faster and faster horses, but there is an upper limit of how fast a horse is ever going to be able to go, and something like a motorcycle represents a paradigm shift in the underlying model of how you get things from here to there very, very quickly. And I don't think, we've got to a point with language models now, the latest generation, we've trained them on the entire internet. We've trained them on basically every book that's ever been digitized. That's as good as they're going to get. It isn't like there's another bigger internet out there that's 10 times the size of the last one we can use to train the next generation. And I think this is where some of the existential panic that you can see in some of the AI startups is like, this is not working yet, and we don't know how to make it any better. We really need somebody to buy us before this bubble bursts here. Now, maybe the question is not whether we are actually going to get general artificial intelligence, because society is full of things that don't really work, but everyone pretends they do, and so that's just the way the world works, like money. There was a guy in 2016 who married his iPhone. He was a film director, a guy called Aaron Chervenak. He married his iPhone in a ceremony in Las Vegas as a publicity stunt, but this got a lot of, press talking about, people marrying their phones, yeah, fell in love with Siri, whatever. Let me give you a scenario to think about. This is Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob they are happily married, and they have been for a long, long time. They are huge nerds. They met on Usenet back in the days of character terminals, and they have been corresponding digitally for the entire 50-something years of their relationship. They have a network-attached storage device at home where they have archived literally probably every word they've ever sent to each other. All their old text chats, all their SMSs, all of their emails, all these kinds of things. They don't have kids. They don't have relatives. They're both only children. Their parents are long gone. And very, very sadly, Bob is beginning to show signs of dementia. And Alice is having to make all kinds of decisions about Bob's end-of-life care. At what point, where do we put him into a home? What should happen in this situation? What should happen in that situation? And the whole time she's doing this, she's thinking, when Bob's gone, there is nobody who is going to be able to make these decisions and advocate on my behalf. So being a huge nerd, she downloads a copy of the Llama 3 open source language model from Facebook and fine-tunes it by training it on all of the correspondence that has gone backwards and forwards between her and Bob over 5 decades. Builds a language model that is basically Bob. And then goes to a lawyer and says, I want this language model to be my next of kin. Anything happens to me, I want you to interrogate the language model and follow its instructions regarding my care. Now, there is nothing here which is impossible. All of those steps could happen today. Now, I want you to imagine that happens. I want you to imagine somebody goes into a court and says, this person has hired me, I'm their legal representation. They want this thing to become their living will. I want you to imagine the legal system as it currently exists in this or any other country. What are they going to do? Are they going to cross-examine the language model? Is the language model going to be able to persuade a lawyer, a judge, that it is in fact sentient enough? Or are they just going to say it's a document? It's just a very, very complicated legal document, and this is how you're supposed to interact with it. All of this stuff could happen right now. This could be the first step on the road to some sort of recognition of machine sentience, even though we don't actually have machine intelligence. Legal recognition of a language model as something that is authorized to make legally significant decisions. I don't know how close this is to happening, and I have no idea what will happen when it does. It could happen today. What happens the day after that? I guess it depends which judge they get and which kind of language model they're using and what the press does about it and what government jurisdiction this takes place under. Now, I saw a talk that Tim Berners-Lee, the creator of the World Wide Web, did a little while ago, talking about the project that he's working on right now, which is a project called Solid. And he and his team are basically working on the idea that one of the big failures of the web is privacy, because we've ended up with a situation where all of your data is held by other people. All your bank information, well, that's held by your bank. All of your, loyalty, your purchasing preferences, your streaming media, your music, all of this is owned by multinational corporations who use it to sell things to you more effectively. And could there be a way that we can kind of flip that model upside down? So instead of other people having all your data, you have all your data. It's a nice idea. It's an idea that was kind of languishing for a little while because no one was really sure what was going to get critical mass with it. And what the Solid project is talking about now is the idea of you keep all your data personal to you in something called a pod. But then I think this is the angle that has kind of got some traction for that project again. They're saying, well, then you can have AI agents. AI agents that run on your hardware that you trust, that work for you, that you give them access the same way that you'd give your doctor access to your health records in a way that you wouldn't give your supermarket. They work for you, so you trust them with this information, you trust them to make decisions and advocate on your behalf. Now, I thought this idea of taking the capabilities of AI and language models as they exist at the moment and giving them access to your own data and letting them operate on your behalf, this to me was a really compelling idea. Let's imagine you folks are on social media, right? I mean, everyone's got to still be on something, because even if you try and cut all the services in the world, your kid's school has a WhatsApp group that you just can't leave. Otherwise, there will be consequences. Or you've got family who only ever communicate using Signal or Skype or whatever. Now, these are horrible, horrible platforms. Every single one of them sucks. They are run by horrible people who hate you and would grind you up and sell you if it thought they would make their stock price go up a quarter of a point. But we are stuck on them because that's what we've got and that's how we communicate. And the people we want to talk to, they are using these things to talk back to us. So let's imagine that you built a service using language models, using AI, and what it does is it goes into these every morning or every hour or every minute, and it just scrapes all the feeds, and it takes out all the crap, it takes out the adverts, it takes out the spam and the link bait and everything, and it gives you this nice little filtered feed of what your friends are actually doing and the pictures they actually took. How long do you think it's going to take to get shut down? Like, this will be gone by lunchtime. And the reason it'll be gone by lunchtime is that these services sell your attention to their customers. You are the human, you are the product. They are like, we've got X billion number of subscribers, you give us money, we will shove your content down their throats and put it in their faces and all this kind of stuff. And this means they absolutely have to be able to tell whether the thing on the other end of the click is a human being or a bot. And that is why we get these things. Now, I was on Steam a little while ago. I was trying to play Quake 2, the remastered edition, which is fantastic. And I went into it and it's like, oh, we just need to check you're human. I'm like, this is odd. All right, click, click, click. And then went, oh, hang on. We need to select the traffic lights. I'm like, okay. Oh, all right. Really? Again? I went through 9 rounds of capture. There was a problem. The capture service was having a bad day, and it was kind of stuck in an infinite loop. But after about 9 rounds of this, I got to a point of like, what if I'm not human? What if I can't see something because I'm actually a robot? This whole kind of Blade Runner existentialist crisis. And this is the difficulty. How, in an age of increasingly sophisticated language models and AI agents, how can your service tell whether the thing on the other end is a human being or a bot? How can we verify, humanity? Now, what most companies do for whom this matters is they're like, we're not even going to touch it. We're going to say, do you have a credit card or a phone? You can put in a credit card number, you've got to be human. We're not going to get into it. We're going to let the bank deal with that. If you can give us a phone number, we can send you a text message, because obviously only human beings have phones. And I mean, there's a barrier to entry. You've got to pay money to get a phone number in most places. And so they're like, yeah, if you've got a mobile phone, you're fine. If you've got a credit card, you're fine. If you don't have either of those things, then sorry, you can't create an account on our service. Not today. Come back when you've got one of the things. And at face value, like, well, that probably makes sense. People without credit cards and phones are probably bots or young children, and neither of those should be running on social media unsupervised. And then you realize that there are edge cases in society that this excludes. There's a charity in the United States that works with rehabilitated prisoners. So people who've just been released from prison, some of these people have been in prison for a long time. We're talking somebody who's been locked up since the 1980s, since the early 90s. They have not used a smartphone. They've not used a web browser. They don't know what the internet is. They've never seen social media. They are released into society and they're like, right, I've served my time. I've paid my debt to society. I'm rehabilitated. How do I find an apartment? Oh, you go and look online. What line? Where's the line? This is literally one of the things they've had again and again. People don't know what online is. Now, they don't have a mobile phone, they don't have a credit card, they don't have either of these because they don't have an address, because they don't have an apartment. And they can't get an apartment until they got a job, and they can't get a job because they can't go through the screening process for the resumes. Why not? Because it's an app on a mobile phone that they don't have. And so we create this exclusionary process. We create this, very, very potentially oppressive thing where just proving you're human becomes a massive problem for running these kinds of services. Now, maybe AI can fix it. The whole, will AI replace software engineers? There are companies out there, I'm sure, who are looking at the headcount and the salary cost of their development division and just going, I wish we could fire them all. That would save so much money. Let's get a machine learning AI language model, whatever you want to call it. Now, let's think for a second about the actual value proposition that exists here. These are the things that we want. As normal customers, we want access to our money that's in our bank. We want the airline tickets we paid for. We want the hotel room we booked. We want the Lego that's in the warehouse full of Lego. And this is us up here. And in between them, there is this layer of websites and apps that don't always work properly. Some of them do, but when they go wrong, it really messes up your whole day. And this is the layer that they're talking about fixing. Most banks, I think, do not want to hire software engineers. Most banks just want to make money. They have no real investment in software engineering as a craft. It's a kind of necessary evil. I think British Airways would love to not have a website because, every time I interact with it, it looks like it wants to be put out of its misery. But you can't book airline tickets without it. It's a necessary part of the process. All of these companies have kind of been dragged online against their will. And so this idea of, we'll just use AI to fix it. But let's flip it around. What if instead of the companies using AI to rebuild their website, what if the companies just went, you know what, we're going to open our APIs and you can figure it out. And then we use our own agents, just like, Tim Berners-Lee's Solid project. We get intelligent agents that can go in and interact with these APIs that we know, that we trust, that have access to our credit card number and our calendar and our frequent flyer miles and all the other things which you have to take into account to get this stuff right. And we take them out of the loop completely. And, the layer in the middle there, if this thing happens, if this exists, that thing is not going to get built by an AI. It's going to get built by human developers because we're the ones who care about getting stuff right. We're the ones who are going to look at a line of code and go, yeah, that's going to work, or no, that's not going to work. Hey, that import looks a bit suspicious. Maybe we're not going to run with that one today. But fundamentally, streaming did not stop people making music. It changed the way you make money out of making music, but it did not change the basic human desire to get a couple of friends together in a room and bash some guitars, and eventually you're like, let's record that and send it to all our mates. Digital photography did not stop people taking pictures. We take more pictures than we've ever taken at any time before. It is still possible to make a living as a professional photographer. If any of you have ever been to, like a big event, weddings, conferences, any of those kinds of things, and everyone's snapping away with their camera phones, and at the end of the day, you've all got 200 unusably blurry pictures no one's ever going to look at again, and then you see the professional photographs, you're like, okay, I get it now. I understand what the craft of photography is about here. What digital photography has done is it has stopped that one person who owns a camera being the de facto photographer at every event that ever happens, because now we've all got those. Uncle Henry turning up with his case of camera equipment to every wedding your family's ever had. It's not really a thing that happens anymore. Or maybe it is. I don't know your Uncle Henry. But certainly in the case of the Beatties, that used to be a thing. It's not a thing anymore. And AI isn't going to replace software engineers because there is so much more to engineering software than just being able to read code and write code and crank out code. Now, I mentioned a couple of times that, the AI revolution, as some people are calling it. We've been here before. And the biggest problem that I think we face is it's the use of this term AI and the way every time it happens, people come away with a really unrealistic set of expectations. We're going to draw a graph here. This is how intelligent machines are, and this is time from the 1960s up to today. And here are data points. This is the average human up the top here. And this is a ginger cat with his head stuck in a paper bag. So those are our kind of thresholds of intelligence. Now, what happened is in the 1960s, there was a revolution in artificial intelligence. The AI laboratory at MIT was just doing astonishing things, and they were inventing symbolic algebra, and they were inventing Lisp, and they were inventing functional programming. And in 1968, Marvin Minsky, one of the lead kind of scientists on this project, said, yes, I think within 5 years, we will see machines that are as smart as a person. 1968. So he's out there working at the forefront of this thing, and I don't think doing it to con investors. They're doing it because they're just really excited about how much awesome stuff they've managed to come out with. And they're like, yeah, by the mid-1970s, we'll have computers that are as smart as people. And of course, it doesn't happen because they hit the limit. They're like, actually, it turns out that being able to break a sentence into tokens and then analyze what the tokens might mean does not unlock the secret to natural language processing. Crap. All right. And what happens is that all the good stuff they come up, we still have that. That AI revolution delivered a lot of really, really useful stuff. It's where we got the idea of manipulating list expressions. It's where we got a lot of the concepts in functional programming. But we stopped calling it that because it worked. AI is the stuff that didn't work. And then we enter the first AI winter, which is a period of about 10 years where governments and corporations won't touch anything with AI written on it because they lost all their money the last time around and didn't get anything to show for it. Minsky's biggest mistake, by the way, was the biggest mistake any software developer can ever make, which is you tell your client when it's going to be finished. If you do that, nah, not going to work. Then the early 1980s, they didn't call it AI this time. They called it expert systems, because the investors still wouldn't put money in anything with AI written on it. But expert systems was the whole idea of building a database that normal people can query by using some kind of wizard to ask it questions. And, you know, this was the kind of thing like car dealerships having a computer that you could go in and say, I drive this far and I got this many kids and I want an automatic, and it'll go, here are the vehicles we have that are suitable for your requirements. It's those kinds of things. You go on any website now that has a product selection wizard or something where you're like, can I filter this by these manufacturers and it needs to be this price band or anything? That's an expert. In the 1980s, that was AI, by any other name. And of course, people were like, oh, it's brilliant, big enough database. We'll have machine, like human level intelligence within a couple of years. Didn't happen. 90s come around, neural networks. Like another new way of approaching the problem of how do we get machines to synthesize and simulate processes that look like intelligence. This was a big deal. Neural networking in the 90s, that gave us all kinds of astonishing things. It gave us the first computer that could beat a human grandmaster at chess. It gave us the first computer, the IBM Watson. Do you remember when that had a cameo on Jeopardy? And it won, and IBM had this AI research project. All that stuff's come out of neural networks. Games nowadays, if you're playing against intelligent opponents in any kind of deathmatch thing, that's neural networking. That's how all that stuff works. We don't call it AI because it works. We call it neural networking. We've still got all that. Yes, another 5 years, didn't happen. And then we get to here. And this is kind of where we're at now. And language models is, we've got computers now that are big enough and fast enough that you can feed the entire internet into them and tell it to look for the patterns and see what gets spat out the other side. And of course, it is easy to get intoxicated with the progress we've seen within the last 5 years and extrapolate that and go, yes, another couple of years we'll have general intelligence. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think we're going to get another plateau. And I don't think the scale on this, I think we're somewhere closer to this. I think we will eventually get somewhere. Now, you'll notice if you look closely that the level of human intelligence is starting to tail off, because the other kind of, you know, apocalypse scenario in all this is that the machines end up smarter than the humans because the humans meet them coming the other way. Not that I'm saying anything about the impact of social media on human intelligence, but yeah, the Turing test might not be passed in the way that Alan Turing originally envisioned it. Now, I want to wrap up today by talking about something that is more important than anything we've talked about here. I want to talk about laptop stickers, because these are the most important part of any holistic developer experience. I love laptop stickers, mainly because they mean I always know which laptop is mine. And I'm like, oh, there are 6 MacBooks here. I wonder which one I should take home today. But I like making my own stickers. And one of the things that I love to do is I like banging together heavy metal band logos and keywords and languages from tech and seeing what comes out. And this is a great thing for testing kind of image synthesis systems, because the pitch is really easy. It's literally the Metallica band logo, but it says that's it. That's the entire brief. That's the perfect brief, captures everything that it needs to do. And so when I create the stickers that I use, and I have a bunch of them here, so come and grab some stickers at the end. What I'll do is I'll look at a bunch of different examples of Metallica's logo. I'll be like, right, so sometimes it's kind of like metallic, and sometimes it's stone, and sometimes it's this. And you look for the things which are consistent, the things that make it distinctive, the things that are always present, and you kind of ignore the rest, you filter that out, and then you're like, okay, and then you replicate those elements and you come up with something. You're like, yeah, okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Now, if you feed that exact prompt into DALL-E, it does what at a glance looks like a pretty good job. But what did it get wrong? Well, it can't spell, because it doesn't know that those shapes are letters of an alphabet. So they're just shapes. They're like shapes that are a bit like the Metallica shapes. They don't mean anything. Now, the aesthetic isn't bad. You know, I quite like the look, and you know, this is quite kind of striking. And if it got the letters right, then we'd probably be onto something, but it doesn't, because that's not what these kind of models are optimized for. Now, I had an idea years ago I really, really wanted a sticker that was based on the Guns N' Roses band logo, but instead of Guns N' Roses, it said ones and zeros. I thought this would be kind of fun, and I couldn't do it. because I can't draw well enough to get the roses in that logo quite right. And I wanted the roses to look like zeros, and I played around with it, could not get it. I asked DALL-E to do this, and again, like, okay, not bad, pretty good job on the aesthetics. Yeah, spelling, not so much. The Onis and Zoses, yeah, great band then. Now, I got most of the way there. I'd drawn the roundel, and I had the kind of, the brushed effect and the font, and I managed to Photoshop the guns to look like digit ones. And I'd drawn the vines and the leaves and everything. And I thought, hang on, maybe these machine learning systems, maybe one of those can draw a red rose that looks like a digit 0. And I was playing around with Midjourney that was installed on a Discord server my friends and I use. And I said, can you do a number 0 in the style of a red rose? And I went, yeah, did this. And I was like, that's it, it's brilliant. And so that delivered the ones and zeros sticker. And I just thought afterwards that it was quite a nice kind of metaphor for this whole thing that's going on. Because this unlocks a capability. This is something I couldn't do before. I wanted this thing to exist and I couldn't make it without it. But it turns out that the secret to it was the human beings are going to take care of the guns and the machines are going to take care of the roses. And I thought that's probably a nice balance point to end on. Thank you, folks.